your tax dollars used to help fund a private vacation in Vegas for a public employee and his wife.
8 News investigative reporter A.J. Legault continues his look now at how the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority is spending your money.
He joins us now live to explain what he's found. A.J.?
Well, and Christina, this past fall, former Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority Police Chief Hal Hazelton was suspended and fired under a cloud of secrecy. The real reasons for his termination have not been made public, but just this week, Hazelton filed this lawsuit against the agency heads at the RRHA for $500,000, claiming he was fired for malicious reasons to muzzle and discredit him. For some time, we've been investigating how the RRHA does business, and what we found is some very suspicious spending on the former chief's public credit card.
It was supposed to be a business trip, a flight from Richmond to San Diego in late September of 2012 for former RRHA Police Chief Hal Hazelton to attend the International Association of Chiefs of Police annual training event being held at the San Diego Convention Center.
Excuse me, Commissioner Holtz?
In light of our recent investigation exposing an RRHA commissioner funding a bus trip to a casino with taxpayer funds,
Does the RRHA encourage people to go gambling?
we began examining expenses on RRHA-issued credit cards.
It's our tax dollars that fund what they're doing.
Rick Tatnall with Better Government Richmond is correct, and what we found, our tax dollars funding, is upsetting not just to government watchdogs,
That's our money.
but also to people who call the community's Chief Hazelton was tasked with policing home.
I think it's a bunch of bull.
Examining hundreds of pages of credit card records and travel reports, we found Chief Hazelton was not alone on his trip. Instead of just one $158 flight to San Diego, there are two. Same thing on the return flight. 2 tickets costing $189 each. The return tickets are not from San Diego where the conference was. They're from Las Vegas. More on that in a minute. Airline records we obtained show it was not another RRHA police officer traveling with the chief. It was his wife, Ashley Hazelton. The couple checked 2 bags at $25 each. Once they landed in San Diego, they rented a car. That cost you $488. RRHA travel policy says car rentals should only be for business necessity, and unless involving 3 or more employees, should be economy or midsize. The chief and his wife rented a full-size car. There's nothing to document the business necessity of the 8-day rental, especially considering the conference only lasted 5 days, and the Hilton hotel they stayed in is connected to the convention center. Hotel parking alone cost $108.
There's a lot of money that's being spent incorrectly, inappropriately, or just flat out in the wrong way.
Credit receipts show meals out at restaurants, where the chief was a generous tipper. RRHA policy says gratuity at meals is to be 15%. At these meals, Hazelton tipped 20%. The couple checked out of the Hilton early on October 3rd. The hotel bill, $1,464. The chief did not even stay for the final training workshop at the conference. You paid $495 in membership and registration fees for him to attend. This receipt shows at 1:25 p.m. they were 171 miles away from San Diego, gassing up on the chief's RRHA credit card at this Shell station in Barstow, California. They put $51.89 in the tank. 3 days later, long after the conference was over, the rental car was returned at the Las Vegas airport. On the flight from Vegas to Richmond, 3 bags were checked. That cost taxpayers $85. After they landed, you also paid for parking for the chief's vehicle at the Richmond airport. Not just for the conference days, but also for the time spent in Vegas. That cost you $96. Mrs. Hazelton wrote that day on her Facebook, "Home Sweet Home," and confirms to a friend they were in Vegas.
No trip to Vegas.
Not what the money should be being used for.
No.
Seeing what we uncovered, citizen watchdog Rick Tatnall questions the oversight at RRHA.
The biggest thing is just the oversight of some of these expenditures that are obviously inappropriate.
2 months after the trip, an RRHA accounting technician questioned the chief's credit card charges, writing to her boss, "To date, there's been no monetary reimbursement." The next day, the Hazeltons cut this check for $347.20, the exact cost of just Mrs. Hazelton's plane tickets. Mr. Hazelton refused our request for an interview, but in an email writes, "I will say this, along with any and all other business trips taken while I was employed by RRHA, were completed and reconciled in accordance with the appropriate policies and procedures in effect at the time." But RRHA has no record of being reimbursed for the luggage fees, rental car, gas, parking, or any other expenses occurred during the conference/Vegas vacation you paid $3,310 for.
It makes me mad. It just makes me mad.
It was more than a year after this trip that Chief Hazelton was suspended and fired. I've asked the Housing Authority CEO, Adrian Goolsby, who was notified of the suspicious spending a year ago and appears to have done nothing at the time, to sit down for an interview. Goolsby, through his spokesperson, repeatedly refused. Juan?
All right, AJ, who besides you is looking into this? Anybody?
Well, we've confirmed that there is an ongoing administrative investigation underway at the RRHA involving former employees of their police department, but no word on if this apparent misuse of public funds is a part of that. Also, after our report on a housing commissioner's publicly funded trip to a casino, HUD, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, announced it would be launching their own investigation at RRHA, and that is still underway.
All right. Thank you very much for that, AJ.
All righty. If you'd like to read former Chief Hazelton's lawsuit against the city, we've posted it for you to see at WRIC.com. Just click on the tab marked 8 News Investigates.
Your money used to fund cable TV in a government center that does not even exist.
Now, for months, investigative reporter AJ Legault has been digging into how the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority and its troubled police department have been spending your tax dollars.
AJ joins us live tonight with this story you'll see only on 8.
Juan, Christina, just last week, the RRHA pulled the plug on its police department, shutting it down. Our story tonight, though, raises serious questions about years of lies and wasted money.
Across from Shaco Hill Cemetery on Hospital Street in Richmond sits the ghost of the RRHA Police Department. The gate is closed and locked tight. The building empty, nothing more than a brick and mortar monument to what just weeks ago was a 7-member police force tasked with enforcing the law and protecting the thousands of people who call Richmond public housing home.
Man, I'm gonna miss him.
While the loss of the police department has many like Mike Horn questioning their future safety,
There's gonna be more crime, and it's gonna get worse.
the department has been mired in scandal for months. Last fall,
Police enforcement, all kinds of things, anything we can throw at it.
RRHA Police Chief Hal Hazelton was suspended and fired under a shroud of secrecy.
At this point, that is a personnel matter.
Hazelton has filed a $500,000 lawsuit claiming he was fired as a conspiracy because of his reporting of improper activity inside RRHA, a claim the RRHA denies. As we began digging into the department, one thing became crystal clear. There was very little financial oversight by RRHA CEO Adrian Goolsby and the Board of Commissioners. We found apparent misuse of public funds going back for years. They include a rental car, gas, airport parking, and airline luggage fees for a private vacation in Las Vegas taken by Chief Hazelton and his wife. We also discovered that for years, you've been paying for NRA memberships for the chief.
The money should have better use for something else. Something, like I said, something to keep the neighborhood, safe.
Poring over years' worth of credit card statements, we found expenses that are enough to have the department's across-the-street neighbors rolling over. In June of 2010, Chief Hazelton spent $900 at H.H. Gregg on a TV and mounting bracket for the new EOC. That's police speak for Emergency Operations Center. Ensuing months show charges for Dish Network, $67 in August, $102 in November, $224 in December. That's also when Comcast Cable begins appearing on Chief Hazelton's RRHA credit card for the EOC. $54 that December, then month after month, year after year. The charges for Comcast and Dish Network keep showing up on RRHA credit statements. In every instance, the bills show they're for the department's Emergency Operations Center.
But there's a major problem with that claim. Would it be okay to come in and see the EOC? Would that be in any...
I don't have access to it.
You don't have access to it?
That's Richmond Police Department Captain Paul Kinnery. He was loaned to RRHA to serve as a temporary police chief in the wake of Hazelton's firing. He told us RRHA management had forbidden him to speak with the media.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go back and call Cedar and tell her that you were here filming.
What we were filming through a glass door on the end of the building was where RRHA sources told us there was once plans to build an EOC. But looking inside, it's a room filled with junk, bikes, an old grill, but certainly no TVs hanging on the wall. And in an email we received just a few minutes later, RRHA PR manager Osita Arawebu tells us RRHA does not have an emergency operations center. Back in February, when we first began investigating the EOC TV situation, I emailed former Chief Hazelton and asked why RRHA PD had both Comcast Cable and DirecTV for the EOC. His response? We had both for a redundant system. One goes down, have the other. A redundant TV system for a non-existent emergency operations center and thousands of tax dollars paid out for cable and dish network. Where's it been going? Well, at the far end of the building, away from the imaginary EOC, right above the door to the chief's office, is a dish. And numerous sources tell us the only TV in the entire building hangs on the wall in the chief's office.
Is there a TV in the building that you know of, aside from what's in the chief's office? No. It's the only answer we got. Former Chief Hazelton has stopped communicating with me and told me if I had further questions, I could talk to his attorney, Juan.
All right, AJ, what does RRHA management have to say about this investigation?
Well, Adrian Goolsby, the $178,000 a year CEO, who ultimately is in charge of ensuring your tax dollars are not wasted at RRHA, has been refusing our numerous requests for an on-camera interview to discuss this and other topics for the past 8 months. Even when we've walked up to her, cameras rolling, all we've gotten is no comment.
A massive salary funded by your tax dollars to run an agency. 8 News investigations found to be rife with waste and apparent fraud. Investigative reporter AJ Legault continues to dig into how Richmond Public Housing spends your money.
Home. That's what nearly 10,000 Richmonders call houses and apartments run by the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority. RRHA claims its units provide an improved way of life for the people living here. But our investigations have uncovered the agency using its massive taxpayer-funded budget, nearly $72 million in 2013, in a lot of ways that don't seem to improve the lives of residents. Here's a recap. An agency credit card used to fund an employee and his wife's private vacation in Vegas.
No trip to Vegas.
Not what the money should be used for.
No.
Public funds used to pay for gambling trips to out-of-state casinos.
It's our tax dollars that fund what they're doing.
Federal dollars used to buy personal items. Thousands spent on cable and dish TV for an emergency operations center that does not even exist.
Money should have better use for something else.
That's just a sampling of what we've exposed taking place at RRHA. Despite accountability and taking ownership for actions being listed as core values for the agency, we found no one who wants to step up to the plate and answer our questions.
You signed this and you spent $1,500. Is it appropriate to be taking people?
No comments. No comment.
Does the RRHA encourage people to go gambling?
No comment.
From the commissioners to CEO Adrian Goolsby, question how RRHA spends the public's money, and all you get is,
I don't have any comment.
Goolsby also does not want to talk about how much she's paid. Responding to a Freedom of Information request, RRHA provided salary documents showing Goolsby was paid a whopping $178,500 last year. That's more than then-Governor Bob McDonnell and Attorney General Ken Cuccinelli. According to federal data collected in 2011, Goolsby's compensation is in the top 3% of public housing executives in the entire nation. In order to protect taxpayers from excessive salaries in public housing, in 2012, HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, established a salary cap, which dictates that no public housing officials can be paid more than $155,000 a year in federal tax dollars. But RRHA is using an accounting loophole to pay Goolsby. They claim her paychecks, which are tens of thousands above the cap, come from other unrestricted funds. That means the rest of her salary comes from rent paid by residents in RRHA housing and local Richmond tax dollars.
I think it's a bunch of bull.
Get this, Goolsby's apparently making even more than RRHA admits to us. They claimed in writing she was paid $178,500 in 2013 and received no bonus. But this federal database shows RRHA reporting paying its CEO closer to $184,000 in 2013 And she got a 10 grand bonus.
Whoa.
Nearly $200,000 to the CEO, when other employees have received little or no raise in years, and numerous folks who call RRHA housing home.
The bed bugs were in this room here.
Tell us they can't even get the authority to exterminate the bed bugs in their improved way of life apartments.
It makes me mad. It just makes me mad.
Our investigation is getting noticed in the highest levels of government. The office of U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa tells us the senator plans to ask both HUD and RRHA to explain the salary discrepancy, saying it's worrisome that RRHA is reporting one set of numbers to us and another to HUD. If they lie to HUD, there can be stiff financial penalties.
So, AJ, is there a federal investigation now underway at the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority?
Yes, HUD's Inspector General currently has an investigation underway at RRHA. It was launched late last year when we first began exposing waste at that troubled agency.
Do you think there are people sitting in jail, sitting in prison today for arrests you made that now you're questioning?
I know they are.
Tonight, 8 News investigates a police department making arrests where they had no right to make them. AJ Legault's been investigating this apparent abuse of police power for months and joins us live now with a story you'll see only on 8. AJ?
Juan, making up their own rules and making arrests out of bounds. That's just what we've uncovered Richmond's public housing police department has been doing for years.
The scream of a siren, blue lights flashing, a sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. Most of us, like VCU professor Jayasima Atulasima,
just 5 years back,
have probably been there a time or two.
I was just pulled over for a wrong turn.
This story is not about a driver's wrong turn. It is about the wrong turn Richmond's public housing police department took at its very inception.
It really opens Pandora's box.
It does.
The death of the RRHA Police Department has been headline news since April 1st, when it was shut down and locked up tight with no warning. A former officer agreed to speak with us on the condition we protect his identity.
You're dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with officers' jobs, their careers. You don't lie to us. You don't lie to the people.
The lie the officer is referring to was written right on RRHA PD's webpage. The department provides citywide law enforcement authority, which enables officers to make arrests on and off RRHA property.
When you worked for RRHA PD, you made arrests off of RRHA property?
Absolutely, on numerous occasions.
Why?
At the time, we were informed by the chief of police as well as some of the command staff. We had citywide jurisdiction.
But who gave the public housing police authority to make arrests off of public housing property? Our investigation discovers the answer to that is no one.
Every police department's supposed to have its jurisdiction spelled out and filed in an official court document. For example, Capitol Police have enforcement power within Capitol Square and 300 feet beyond. A University of Richmond officer's jurisdiction is on university grounds and adjacent streets. But the court has no record of any kind regarding RRHA and its officers' jurisdiction.
That's a problem.
Responding to our Freedom of Information request, both RRHA and the Richmond Police Department also could provide no documentation granting RRHA citywide arrest powers. U of R law professor Hank Chambers finds our discovery extremely troubling.
We have laws for a reason. And we have limitations on jurisdictions for a reason.
We went back to the very founding of the department. In 2006, Hal Hazelton, the public safety chief at RRHA, petitioned Virginia's Department of Criminal Justice Services to make his department an official criminal justice agency. He wrote his department was established to work towards the detection and apprehension of persons engaged in illegal drug and criminal activity in and around RRHA property. But it wasn't long before the public housing cops began extending their authority well beyond in and around RRHA property.
Do you think, looking back now, knowing what you know, do you think you had a right to do that?
I can't say. I would say no. I haven't been able to find anything that justifies us being able to do that.
Our search of records uncovered numerous traffic stops and arrests made nowhere near RRHA property. This citation for possession of drug paraphernalia was issued in front of City Hall at 9th and Broad. Professor Atulasima was ticketed for disregarding a red light at West Broad and Belvedere.
It's good that such an investigative report has been taken up.
The record of arrests we obtained made off of RRHA property by their police department goes on and on and on.
I don't think most people, including prosecutors, expected or thought RRHA was roaming the city executing arrests.
We took the results of our investigation to Richmond Commonwealth Attorney Mike Herring.
You raised the example of a drug charge or a cocaine charge. Well, in all likelihood, that cocaine was discovered in the course of an RRHA officer's search. And if it's not within RRHA jurisdiction, then that's probably a defective arrest and prosecution.
Who gave you that authority to make those arrests?
That's my question as well. Who gives us that authority?
And right now,
you
don't know?
I have no clue.
No clue. The people who should have one are former Chief Hal Hazelton, who's told us to talk to his attorney, and RRHA CEO Adrian Goolsby. We've reached out to Goolsby countless times in the last year about apparent fraud and mismanagement in her agency. The only response we get,
I don't have any comment.
But less than 2 weeks after we began demanding records spelling out the department's jurisdiction, Goolsby sent out a press release announcing the police department was being discontinued in order to focus on the core mission of providing housing services. A couple days later, they wrote to 8 News regarding our demands for proof of their claim to citywide jurisdiction that they had no additional records.
Do you think there are people sitting in jail, sitting in prison today for arrests you made that now you're questioning?
I know they are.
You know it.
I know it.
The Richmond Commonwealth's Attorney's Office is looking into this situation and has written a letter to RRHA telling them they need to preserve all their arrest records. We've reached out to former Chief Hazelton's attorney and have received no response. Juan.
All right, AJ, the Commonwealth's attorney said defective arrest and prosecution. Incredible stuff here. What does this mean for folks who've been arrested by RRHA police?
Well, if you were arrested or ticketed by RRHA officers off of RRHA property, you may have a case to see your conviction overturned. The Commonwealth Attorney tells me if people come to his office with questions about one of these arrests, they're going to review them on a case-by-case basis.
Meanwhile, a court appearance today for a former police chief at the center of an 8 News investigation into the misuse of public funds and the abuse of police powers.
He's suing the RRHA for $500,000, claiming he was fired as retaliation, then publicly disgraced. 8 News investigative reporter AJ Legault has our continuing coverage.
Shortly before 9 a.m., former RRHA police chief Hal Hazelton walked into Richmond Circuit Court. He was there for a hearing on this 6-page lawsuit for $500,000 he filed against his old bosses at RRHA, including CEO Adrian Goolsby and former chairman of the Board of Commissioners James Carlton. Hazelton claims he was fired as a conspiracy because of his reporting of improper activity. But recent 8 News investigations showed under Hazelton's leadership, his police department was making up their own rules and making arrests out of bounds with no jurisdiction.
Do you think there are people sitting in jail, sitting in prison today for arrests you made that now you're questioning?
I know they are.
You know it.
I know it.
Numerous former RRHA officers who've asked we protect their identities tell us Chief Hazelton told them they had citywide jurisdiction, and because of that, they made countless arrests off RRHA property, when our investigation has shown they had no right to do so. The officers say both they and the public deserve answers from their former chief.
Whether or not it was known by the agency itself, and in addition to that, whether or not the chief of police at the time lied to us.
Answers Hazelton today refused to provide.
Can you tell us what was going on with the jurisdiction over at RRHA when we see you had officers making arrests all over the place without jurisdiction?
Have a good day.
You want to talk with us about it at all?
Our investigations have also exposed Hazelton's agency credit card used to fund a private vacation in Vegas for he and his wife. Taxpayers also footed the bill for Hazelton's NRA membership. And then there's years and thousands of dollars worth of suspicious payments on Hazelton's credit card for both cable and dish TV for the department's Emergency Operations Center, or EOC. RRHA management admit to us in an email they don't even have an EOC. Although sources tell us at one point there was talk of building one inside this room that's never been anything but a place to store junk. more issues the former chief refuses to discuss with us. In court today, parts of Hazelton's lawsuit were dropped, including those against former Chairman Carlton.
In court, lawyers for Hal Hazelton and for RRHA management said the two sides might be able to reach a settlement agreement in the $500,000 civil case within the next couple of weeks. AJ Legault, 8 News.